My family forced me to confess to my older brother's crime to protect him, but they never truly expected one silent move that reversed everything. My brother Carson was born with a spotlight on him. I was born in his shadow, and for 19 years that was okay. He was the star quarterback, the debate team captain, the one everyone expected to do great things. At 22, he was already on that path with a good job lined up after college and a future so bright it was blinding. I was just Benjamin, the quiet one, the one who was good with computers, the one who stayed in his room. I didn't mind the shadow. It was comfortable. It was safe, until the night that shadow wasn't big enough to hide in anymore. I remember that night with a clarity that still feels like a physical burn. It was a Tuesday around 11 p.m. I was in my room, headphones on, probably debugging some code for a personal project. The house was quiet. My parents were downstairs watching TV. Carson was out with friends. It was all so painfully normal. The kind of normal you don't appreciate until it's gone forever. The first sign that something was wrong was the sound of the front door. It wasn't just opened. It was thrown open, slamming against the wall with a hollow boom that shook the whole house. I ripped my headphones off. Downstairs, the TV went silent. I heard my mother's startled voice. "Carson, is that you? What on earth?" Her voice was cut off. I heard a choked sound, something between a sob and a gasp. Then my father's voice, low and urgent. "Carson, what is it? What happened?" I crept to my bedroom door and opened it just a crack. I could see the top of the stairs leading down into the entryway. My brother, my invincible golden boy brother, was a complete wreck. His clothes were rumpled, his hair was a mess, but it was his face that stopped my heart. It was dead white, slick with sweat, and his eyes were wide with a kind of primal terror I had never seen before. He was trembling, his hands shaking so badly he could barely stand. And the smell, even from the top of the stairs I could smell it. The sour, heavy scent of alcohol mixed with something else. Something like fear. I messed up," Carson stammered, his voice cracking. "Dad, I really messed up." My father put his hands on Carson's shoulders. "Son, talk to me. Were you in a fight? Did you wreck the car?" Carson let out a broken sob and shook his head frantically. Worse. So much worse. He collapsed into my father's arms, his whole body shaking. My mother was hovering, her hands fluttering around him, not knowing what to do. The air was thick with panic. I was driving. Carson finally choked out his words, muffled against my dad's shoulder. "I was on Old Creek Road. I'd had a few drinks, Dad. I know I shouldn't have. I was driving too fast." He took a shuddering breath. Someone ran out into the road. It was so dark. I didn't see them until it was too late. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. It was absolute, a total void of noise where the world used to be. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a tiny strangled gasp escaping. My father's voice was dangerously quiet. "Carson, what did you do?" I panicked. He whispered the words, tumbling out in a rush. I panicked. I hit the brakes, but it was too late. There was a sound, and I just kept going. I drove away. Dad, I drove away. Vehicular manslaughter, hit and run, DUI. The words weren't spoken, but they hung in the air like poison gas. My brother, the perfect son, had just destroyed his life, and someone else's. My mind reeled. We had to call the police. We had to call an ambulance. We had to do the right thing. But that's not what happened. I watched as my father's expression shifted. The initial shock and horror began to recede, replaced by something else. Something hard and cold and calculating. He steered Carson over to the living room couch and sat him down. My mother was already there, stroking his hair, murmuring, "It's okay, baby, it's okay. It was an accident." An accident! He was driving drunk. He fled the scene. A person was hurt, maybe, gone, and they were comforting him. My father began to pace the living room, his hands clasped behind his back. Okay, think. We have to think. He wasn't thinking about the victim. He wasn't thinking about justice. He was thinking about how to protect Carson. And that's when I saw it. The moment everything changed forever. My father stopped pacing. He looked at my mother. Then slowly they both turned their heads and looked up the stairs directly at the crack in my door. Directly at me. In that moment, I wasn't their son. I was a solution to a problem. My dad's voice was calm, but it carried up the stairs with chilling authority. "Benjamin, get down here, now." My blood ran cold. I walked down those stairs like a man walking to the gallows. The living room felt like a different universe. The TV was still on muted, flashing, meaningless colors on the screen. Carson was curled up on the couch, my mother holding him like he was a little boy who'd scraped his knee. My father stood in the middle of the room, his face a mask of grim determination. He looked at me, not with love or concern, but with an unnerving intensity, like a general sizing up a soldier he was about to send on a suicide mission. "Benjamin," he began, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Your brother is in trouble, serious trouble. A stupid youthful mistake has put his entire future at risk." A mistake, I wanted to scream. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is failing a test. This was a catastrophe. His life is over if this comes out. My mother added, her voice thick with tears, but her eyes were sharp, pleading. Everything he's worked for, college, his job, everything, gone. I just stood there, 19 years old, my mind completely blank with shock. I didn't know what to say. I looked at Carson, my older brother, the one who was supposed to protect me, and he wouldn't even meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, shivering. Then my father laid it out. The plan, the insane, monstrous plan that they had cooked up in less than 5 minutes. "You're going to take the blame," he said. The words were so simple, so direct. They didn't land like a suggestion. They landed like a verdict. I think I laughed. A short, hysterical bark of a sound. "What? You can't be serious." My father's eyes narrowed. I have never been more serious in my life. "Listen to me. Carson is 22. He was drinking. This will be the end of him. They will throw the book at him. But you're 19. You have a clean record. You don't drink. You can say you swerved to avoid a deer, that you panicked. They'll be lenient. A slap on the wrist, community service probation at the worst. You can handle that." The room started to spin. They had it all worked out. A neat little story, a convenient scapegoat. Me. "No," I whispered. "No, I can't. That's lying to the police. That's a crime." "It's a bigger crime to let your brother's life be destroyed over one bad night," my mother shot back, her voice rising. "We are a family, Benjamin. This is what families do. We protect each other. We sacrifice for each other. Your brother would do it for you. Would he?" I looked at Carson, who was now staring at me, his eyes filled not with gratitude, but with a desperate, selfish plea. He wasn't thinking about me. He was thinking about himself. And in that moment, I saw him for what he was. Not a hero, not my protector. Just a scared man willing to let his little brother burn to save his own skin. They kept at it for what felt like hours. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. They brought up everything they had ever done for me. The car they helped me buy, the college tuition they were paying. They reminded me of how much they loved me, how I was part of this family, and how this was my one chance to prove my loyalty, to pay them back. It was a tidal wave of guilt, obligation, and twisted love. I was drowning in it. My father put his hands on my shoulders, his grip like steel. "Benjamin, look at me. This is the most important thing you will ever do for this family. You will save your brother. You will save all of us from this nightmare. All you have to do is tell a simple story. We will be right there with you. We will hire the best lawyer. We will take care of everything." I was 19. I was in shock. My brain just couldn't process the enormity of it all. All I knew was that my entire family was looking at me, their love and approval hanging on a single word. They had cornered me, and I couldn't see a way out. Finally, worn down, terrified, and utterly broken, I gave them the answer they wanted. "Okay," I whispered. The word felt like poison on my tongue. "I'll do it." The relief in the room was sickening. My mother cried, but this time they were tears of joy. My father clapped my shoulder, a proud look on his face that made me want to vomit. Carson finally looked at me and mumbled, "Thank you. I owe you, man. I'll make it up to you." The next morning was a blur. They coached me on the story until I could recite it in my sleep. I was driving home from a late-night study session. A deer jumped out. I swerved. I heard a noise. I panicked and drove home. It was a flimsy, pathetic lie, but it was all they had. Walking into that police station felt like walking into my own grave. My parents were on either side of me, playing the part of concerned, supportive parents. I sat in a cold, sterile interrogation room and recited the lines I'd been given. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was speaking a language I didn't understand. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to tell the truth, but the image of my family's faces, their desperate pleas, kept me silent. They charged me. Vehicular manslaughter. Leaving the scene of a crime. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was serious. This was my future, my life being signed away on a piece of paper. As they said they would, my parents paid my bail. When I walked out of the station back into the sunlight, I didn't feel free. I felt owned. The money they had just spent wasn't a gift. It was a chain. They hadn't rescued me. They had purchased my silence. The weeks that followed were a living nightmare. I was trapped in the house with them, a prisoner in my own home. They treated me with a kind of suffocating kindness that was worse than any punishment. They made me my favorite meals. They told me how brave I was, how proud they were. They acted like we were all in this together, a family united against a terrible tragedy. But at night, I'd see the way they looked at Carson. They looked at him with relief, with love, with unwavering devotion. And when they looked at me with expectation. I was no longer their son. I was their secret. I was the sacrifice they had made to save the one who truly mattered. The debt I owed them was brought up in 1,000 little ways, a casual mention of the lawyer's fees, a reminder of how much this was costing them, not just in money but in stress. I was a burden but a necessary one. I lived under a cloud of constant gnawing fear. The lie was a living thing, a monster that sat on my chest while I slept and followed me around all day. I had given up everything for them for my brother. And as the date for my first court appearance grew closer, a terrifying thought began to take root in my mind. They had sacrificed me once. What was to stop them from doing it again? The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday. It was from the lawyer my parents had hired my lawyer supposedly, though it never felt like he worked for me. He spoke in a calm, professional tone that made my skin crawl. He had news. The prosecutor's office had extended an offer. A plea deal. He explained the terms, but the words just swam in my head like sharks in a tank. All I really heard was the number. 5 years. 5 years in a concrete box for a crime I didn't commit. He presented it as a win, a strategic victory. Given the severity of the initial charges, he said, his voice smooth as polished stone, "This is a very favorable outcome. We were looking at a potential 15 to 20 if this went to trial and we lost. If we lost." When I hung up, the silence in my room was deafening. 5 years. I was 19. If I took this deal, I would be 24 when I got out. My entire college experience, the start of my career, the years when you're supposed to figure out who you are, all of it would be stolen from me. And for what? To protect Carson. That evening, my father called me into his study. He had the official paperwork spread out on his desk, a neat stack of white paper that represented the end of my life as I knew it. He had that same look on his face as the night of the accident, a grim paternal resolve. He wasn't asking me, he was telling me. The lawyer called, he said, gesturing to a chair. "This is good news, son. This is our way out of the woods. Our way out, not my way out." My mother came in and stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder. She was trying to smile, but it was a brittle, fragile thing. "It's a blessing, Benjamin," she said softly. 5 years. It sounds like a lot now, but it will go by so fast. And we'll be there for you. Every visit, every letter, and when you come home, we'll be right here waiting. I looked from her face to my father's. I saw the relief in their eyes, the eagerness. In that moment, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They weren't afraid of me going to prison. They were afraid of the trial. A trial meant questions. It meant evidence. It meant lawyers digging into phone records, GPS data, security footage. A trial meant 100 different ways for the truth to crawl out of the shallow grave they'd buried it in. This plea deal wasn't a life raft for me. It was a guarantee for them. It was the final nail in the coffin of the truth. If I signed this, I would legally become the guilty one. The case would be closed. Carson would be safe forever, and I would be erased. "What about a trial?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What if we fight it? I'm innocent." The air in the room went cold. My father's expression hardened. "Don't be a fool, Benjamin. We can't risk that. The evidence is stacked against you because you confessed. A jury will hear that confession and it's over. This deal is a gift. It's the only sensible path. My confession, the lie they had forced into my mouth. And now they were using that same lie as a weapon against me, a reason why I had no other choice. It was a perfect self-contained trap. Later that night, I saw Carson. He was in the backyard on the phone with one of his friends laughing about something. He was planning a weekend trip to the lake. While my world was shrinking to the size of a 5-year prison sentence, His was expanding, moving on completely unburdened. He was free. I was the one on bail, the one with a curfew, the one whose entire existence was a lie waiting to be formally stamped and filed away by the state. The resentment that had been simmering in my gut for weeks began to boil. It was a hot, acidic anger that burned away the fear and the shock. I had sacrificed my name, my future, my very identity for him. And he was laughing. He was planning a lake trip. He hadn't visited me. He hadn't asked how I was coping. He just took my sacrifice, tucked it away, and went on with his life. I wasn't his brother anymore. I was his get-out-of-jail-free card. The next day, my father announced there would be a family meeting that evening. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, he said, not looking at me. We need to present a united front when we tell the lawyer to accept the deal. A united front. The phrase echoed in my mind. It sounded like something a general would say before sending a soldier on a suicide mission. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this meeting was my last chance. It wasn't a discussion. It was a final briefing before my execution. They were going to sit me down and reinforce the walls of my prison, remind me of my duty, my debt, my role in their twisted play. They needed to make absolutely sure that I would walk into that lawyer's office and sign my life away without another word of protest. All day, a new kind of fear settled over me. It wasn't the panicked, helpless fear I'd felt before. This was a cold, sharp-edged fear of absolute finality. I kept picturing that piece of paper, my signature on the bottom line, the sound of a cell door clanging shut. I knew I couldn't do it. I would rather face the uncertainty of a trial, the wrath of my family, anything, than willingly lock myself in that cage for them. But what could I do? It was my word against all of theirs. I had confessed. They had paid for my lawyer. In the eyes of the world, they were the supportive family standing by their troubled son. The truth was my only weapon, but I had no proof. The meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock. At 6:45, I was in my room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear them gathering downstairs, my father's deep voice, my mother's softer tones, Carson's nervous cough. They were assembling the firing squad. I looked around the room I grew up in, the posters on the wall, the books on my shelf, the whole history of a life that was about to end. I couldn't let them do this. I couldn't let them win so easily. There had to be a way. My eyes landed on my smartphone sitting on my nightstand. An idea sparked in my mind so audacious and terrifying that it took my breath away. It was a long shot. It was dangerous. But it was something. It was the only move I had left to make. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I scrolled through my apps, my thumb hovering over the simple, unassuming icon for the voice memo recorder. What if I could get them to admit it? To say it all out loud just one more time, they were so confident, so sure of their control over me. They wouldn't be guarded. They wouldn't suspect a thing. They would just see me, the dutiful sacrifice, ready for my final instructions. This was it, my one chance to get proof, my one chance to capture the truth. I stood up and walked to my bedroom door. I needed a moment alone, a plausible excuse. I went to the upstairs bathroom and locked the door behind me. Leaning against the sink, I stared at my reflection. I saw a pale, terrified 19-year-old boy. But behind the fear, for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of defiance. A spark of the person I used to be. I took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled out my phone. My thumb swiped to the voice recorder app and I opened it. The screen showed a simple interface, a big red button, and a timer set to 0. This was the point of no return. If they found this phone, if they even suspected, I didn't want to think about it. But the alternative, the plea deal, the prison cell, the slow erasure of my soul was so much worse. I pressed the red button. The timer began to tick upwards. The microphone was active. I quickly locked the screen, which kept the recording active in the background, a silent secret witness. I slid the phone into the front pocket of my jeans, making sure the top edge where the microphone was had a clear path. I splashed some cold water on my face, took one last look at the stranger in the mirror, and unlocked the bathroom door. I walked down the stairs, each step a conscious, deliberate act. The sound of my own footsteps was drowned out by the frantic pounding in my chest. I entered the living room. They all turned to look at me. My father was in his armchair, the plea agreement on the table next to him. My mother was on the sofa wringing her hands. And Carson was standing by the fireplace, unable to meet my eyes. The trap was set. "Benjamin," my father said, his voice laced with that infuriating false sympathy. Come sit down. We need to talk. I walked over to the empty chair across from him and sat. I could feel the slight weight of the phone in my pocket. It felt like a stone, and it felt like a shield. It was my only hope. I folded my hands in my lap, looked at the man who was supposed to protect me, and prepared to listen to him explain in meticulous detail exactly how he planned to destroy my life. And I prayed that my silent little witness would hear every single word. My father cleared his throat, a sound like gravel turning over, and tapped the legal document on the coffee table. Benjamin, he began, we've reviewed the prosecution's offer. The plea deal. He said the words as if they were a business arrangement, a minor inconvenience to be managed. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. It's what we have to do. I stayed silent, letting the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen fill the space between his words. I needed them to talk. I needed them to fill the silence with their poison. My phone nestled in my pocket was a silent sponge soaking it all up. My mother leaned forward, her face a mask of practiced sorrow. Honey, think of it as a sacrifice. For the family. For your brother. She glanced at Carson, who was still staring at the floor, the picture of pathetic guilt. Carson. He made a terrible, terrible mistake. A moment of poor judgment. It shouldn't ruin his entire life. He's 22. He has so much potential. A mistake. That's what they called it. A high-speed, drunken decision that ended a person's life and left them bleeding on the asphalt. A mistake. In my life, I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. What about my potential? My father's face hardened. The sympathetic act was already wearing thin. Your life will be on hold. It's not the end of the world. You're 19. You're strong. You can handle this. You'll do your time, you'll get out, and we'll be here for you. We'll set you up. You won't have to worry about a thing. I'll owe you one, Ben Carson mumbled from the fireplace, finally looking at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, but not with tears for me or for the person he hit. They were tears of self-pity. I swear, I'll make it up to you. This was it, the moment of truth. I needed to hear it from him, from them, unambiguously. Make what up to me? I asked, my voice steady now. What exactly am I taking the blame for Carson? The room went dead quiet. My mother shot me a warning look. My father's jaw clenched. Carson hesitated, looking at our parents for his script. My father gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. For the accident, Carson said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. For driving the car that night. For what happened. It was me, Ben. I was driving. I was drunk. I panicked. I drove away, but I can't go to jail. I can't. And there it was. The confession. The whole ugly truth, spoken aloud in the safety of our living room, directly into the microphone of my phone. But my father wasn't done. He wanted to make sure I understood the terms of my surrender. So this is the final word, my father said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening register. You will go to your lawyer tomorrow. You will tell him you are accepting the plea deal. You will sign the papers, you will stand up in court, and you will show remorse for what you did. If you do this, you are still our son. If you do not, if you even think about changing the story, he let the threat hang in the air. My mother picked it up. If you don't, Benjamin, you will be on your own. We paid your bail. We hired your lawyer. Everything you have is because of us. We can take it all away. You will have nothing. No family, no support, no money. You will be a pariah. Do you understand? We are giving you a choice. Stand with your family or stand against us. But if you stand against us, you stand alone. Every word was another nail in Carson's coffin. They were spelling it out, the coercion, the conspiracy, the complete and total abandonment of me for him. They laid out the entire crime from start to finish, believing I was too broken to fight back. I looked at their faces. My father, the stern patriarch, demanding obedience. My mother, the emotional manipulator, demanding sacrifice. My brother, the golden child, demanding my future. They weren't my family anymore. They were a pack of wolves ready to devour one of their own to save the alpha. I slowly stood up. The weight of the phone in my pocket felt like a block of concrete, now heavy with the truth. I understand, I said, and the double meaning was only for me. I need to think. Before they could say another word, I turned and walked out of the living room, up the stairs, and into my bedroom, closing the door behind me. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was with adrenaline, not fear. I pulled out the phone. The recording was still active. I hit stop and saved the file. I renamed it Insurance. I sat on my bed for a long time, listening to the muffled sounds of my family downstairs, their voices confident, now believing they had won. But their victory was an illusion. The war was already over. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I didn't call my lawyer to accept the plea. I emailed him a single audio file with the subject line, urgent evidence. The courtroom was cold. The air was thick with tension and cheap disinfectant. I sat at the defendant's table, my lawyer beside me. Across the room, my family sat in the front row. My father gave me a sharp, commanding look that said, asterisk, remember the plan. My mother tried for a pained, supportive smile. Carson just stared straight ahead, a ghost in a suit. They had no idea the ground was about to collapse beneath them. The proceedings droned on. The prosecution laid out its case against me using the false confession I had given 4 weeks ago. It was surreal hearing a story about myself that was a complete fabrication. Finally, the judge turned to my counsel. Does the defense have anything to present before sentencing arguments? My lawyer stood up, his movements calm and deliberate. Yes, Your Honor, we do. The defense has come into possession of new and definitive evidence that pertains directly to this case. Evidence that will prove my client Benjamin Ramos is unequivocally innocent. A ripple of confusion went through the courtroom. I saw my father lean forward, his brow furrowed. My mother whispered something to him. Carson's head snapped in my direction, his eyes wide with sudden panic. What is this evidence? The judge asked, his voice stern. An audio recording, Your Honor, my lawyer announced. A conversation that took place 5 days ago. We have already provided a transcript to the prosecution. With the court's permission, we would like to play it. The judge granted permission. A technician connected a cable, and a moment later the sound of my father's voice filled the silent courtroom. My family froze. The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Carson looked like he was going to be sick. They recognized the moment instantly. The trap they had set for me was now closing on them. The court listened in stunned silence as the entire conversation played out. Every lie, every threat, every manipulation. They heard my mother call a person's death a mistake. They heard my father threaten to disown me and leave me with nothing. And then came the final damning blow. My own voice, quiet and clear from the recording. Asterisk. What exactly am I taking the blame for, Carson? Asterisk. And my brother's reply echoing through the chamber of justice. Asterisk for the accident. For driving the car that night? It was me, Ben. I was driving. I was drunk. I panicked. I drove away. Asterisk. A collective gasp went through the gallery. The prosecutor was on his feet, his face a mask of fury and astonishment. The judge's expression was like granite. He stared directly at my brother Carson, who had shrunk so far down in his seat he seemed to disappear. He looked at my parents, who were staring at me now, their faces contorted not with remorse, but with pure, undiluted hatred. The betrayal was absolute, but in their eyes I was a traitor. When the recording finished, a profound silence descended upon the room. It was over. The judge's gavel came down with a crack that felt like a thunderclap. In light of this appalling evidence, he said, his voice ringing with disgust, the court finds the defendant, Benjamin Ramos, not guilty. All charges are dismissed. You are exonerated. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I was free. But the judge wasn't finished. He looked over at my brother. As for you, Mr. Carson Ramos, this recording serves as a full confession. Based on this and the evidence previously gathered, this court finds you guilty of vehicular manslaughter, driving under the influence, and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. He paused, his gaze sweeping over my parents. Furthermore, this court recognizes the egregious conspiracy to obstruct justice and coerce a false confession. This was not just a panic. It was a calculated, cruel plot to sacrifice an innocent young man to save a guilty one. He looked back at my brother, who was now openly sobbing. Given the severity of these compounded crimes, the judge declared, his voice leaving no room for appeal, I sentence you, Carson Ramos, to life in the state penitentiary. Life. The word hung in the air, a death sentence of a different kind. My mother let out a strangled cry. My father sat rigid, his face pale and slack with shock. The family had gambled my future to save Carson's, and in the end, they had lost everything. As bailiffs came to take a weeping Carson away, my parents finally looked at me. There was no sadness in their eyes. No regret, only a cold, burning rage. In that single silent moment, I knew I had lost them forever. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The city sounds of traffic, the chatter of people on the sidewalk all seemed distant and muffled. The sun was bright, but I felt no warmth. I was a free man. I had won. I had taken back the life they tried to steal from me, but the victory tasted like ash. I had walked into that courthouse with a family and a future defined by their lies. I walked out with nothing but myself. No home to return to, no parents to call, no brother to forgive. I was 19 years old, exonerated and utterly alone and outcast by my own hand. I stood on the courthouse steps, a stranger in my own life. I had reclaimed my future, but the price was my entire past. And as I took my first steps into that new unknown reality, I knew this wasn't a celebration. It was survival. And my new life had to be built from scratch, starting right now.